Welcome to Globewise Entertainment. Some films shine so brightly, they refuse to stay in the shadows of time. In today's video, we're diving into 10 incredible films that were too good to stay forgotten, hidden gems, cult classics, and overlooked masterpieces that deserve a spotlight once again. Whether you're a hardcore film buff or just love discovering underrated cinema, this list will surprise you. If you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, hit that button now. Your next favorite movie might just be one click away. And don't forget to tell us in the comments which forgotten film on this list you love the most, or which hidden gem we should feature next. Let's rediscover cinema one forgotten classic at a time. 1. The Night of the Hunter, 1955. A sinister sermon in shadows. Once upon a time in Depression-era America, two children fled into the darkness, carrying a secret their father died to protect. Chased by a man of the cloth with murder in his heart and scripture on his lips, they drifted downriver, away from safety and into legend. This was no ordinary preacher. Harry Powell, played with eerie brilliance by Robert Mitchum, wore love and hate tattooed on his knuckles and twisted the Bible to justify every wicked deed. With a soft and a cold blade, he haunted the children like a ghost in black. Shot like a gothic fairy tale with surreal shadows and haunting silence, The Night of the Hunter was misunderstood in its time, flopping at the box office and dismissed by critics. But like truth itself, it refused to stay buried. Today, it's hailed as one of the most original and chilling thrillers ever made, a cinematic sermon of innocence, evil, and endurance. It wasn't just a film. It was a dark lullaby that still echoes through Hollywood's history. 2. Sorcerer, 1977. A journey fueled by dynamite and desperation. For broken men. For pasts soaked in guilt and blood. From different corners of the world, they found themselves exiled in a sweaty, lawless jungle, forgotten by fate and hunted by their own regrets. Then came the impossible offer. Drive 2 trucks loaded with unstable nitroglycerin across 200 miles of treacherous terrain to stop an oil fire. The reward? Cash, a passport, and maybe salvation. But this wasn't just a job. It was a test of spirit, sanity, and survival. Directed by the French Connection's William Friedkin, Sorcerer was a gritty remake of the French classic The Wages of Fear. It thundered with tension, sweat, and despair. Every rickety bridge and rocky cliff felt like a heartbeat from death. And with a haunting electronic score by Tangerine Dream, it played like a fever dream on wheels. Released the same summer as Star Wars, Sorcerer was buried under lightsabers and box office bombs. But time has unearthed its brilliance. Today, it's seen as one of the most relentless and underrated thrillers of the 1970s, a masterclass in suspense and survival. It's not magic, it's Sorcerer. 3. Wake in Fright, 1971. Welcome to the Outback, where civilization ends. Schoolteacher John Grant only wanted to get back to Sydney. One simple stop in the dusty mining town of Bundiniaba, and he'd be on his way. But the Outback had other plans. What started as one beer turned into a blur of gambling, guns, and grim laughter. Trapped by heat, booze, and the hypnotic madness of locals, John descended into a nightmare of primal survival. The desert didn't just strip away his dignity. It revealed the beast within. Wake in Fright is a psychological outback thriller that tears at the thin veil of civility. Directed by Ted Kotcheff, this Australian cult classic was nearly lost for good after bombing at the box office. Its negatives were nearly destroyed. But decades later, it was rescued and restored, just like a half-dead man crawling out of sand. Now celebrated for its raw power and nerve-shredding realism, Wake in Fright isn't just a film. It's a slow-motion fall into the heart of human darkness. In Bundiniaba, no one leaves unchanged if they leave at all. 4. Paper Moon, 1973. A grift, a girl, and a dusty dream. The Great Depression had stripped America bare, but con men like Moses Prey still found ways to make a dollar. Bibles for widows, lies for profit. It was all part of the game. Then came Addie Loggins, sharp-tongued, tough as nails, and possibly his daughter. Or maybe not. Either way, she wasn't going anywhere. Together, they hit the road in a beat-up Model T, swindling their way across Kansas with charm, grit, and a con for every town. But this wasn't just a grifting spree. It was a mismatched love story between two loners, bound not by blood, but by survival and snappy one-liners. Filmed in crisp black and white by Peter Bogdanovich, Paper Moon feels like a forgotten photograph come to life. Part comedy, part melancholy, and entirely unforgettable. Tatum O'Neal, just 10 years old, won an Oscar for a role. The youngest winner in history. It wasn't a blockbuster. It wasn't loud. But Paper Moon has heart, humor, and hustle. Like a perfectly folded con, it fools you, then leaves you smiling. Because sometimes, the best partnerships are forged in dust and daylight dreams. 5. The Last Wave, 1977. When the rain comes, truth drowns. It began with a storm that didn't belong. A violent downpour in the dead of summer. No warning. No reason. Just water and death. David Burton, a quiet Sydney lawyer, was assigned to defend a group of Aboriginal men accused of murder. But this was no ordinary case. The deeper he dug, the more the world around him cracked. Visions, dreams, whispers of ancient knowledge buried beneath modern Australia. The city trembled. The sky wept. And David realized he wasn't just defending a case. He was confronting a prophecy. Directed by Peter Weir, Picnic at Hanging Rock, The Last Wave is a haunting collision of Western logic and indigenous mysticism. With eerie visuals and an unsettling soundscape, the film drips with dread, as nature itself seemed to revolt against human ignorance. Ignored by mainstream audiences upon release, it later became a cult favorite, an environmental and spiritual warning shrouded in rain and mystery. Because when the dream time awakens, even reality must answer. 6. Targets, 1968. The day the real monster took aim. The old monster knew he was finished. Byron Orlock, a weary horror icon, watched his legacy fade like fog under sunlight. His Dracula-like scares and haunted castle films felt ancient in a world now shaking from real-life tragedies. Audiences no longer feared shadows. They feared headlines. Meanwhile, in sunny suburbia, a soft-spoken young man named Bobby looked ordinary. Too ordinary. But behind his calm eyes was a growing storm. One morning, without warning, he picked up a rifle, kissed his family goodbye, and began his quiet rampage. 2 stories. One fading fiction, one rising nightmare. Their worlds collided at a drive-in movie theater, where Orlock was making one last public appearance. On screen, old horror. In the parking lot, new terror. And as the bullets tore through cars and panic erupted, Orlock stood face to face with the new face of fear. Not a vampire, not a phantom, but a boy with a gun. Targets, directed by young Peter Bogdanovich and produced by Roger Corman, was more than a thriller. It was a reflection of a broken America. In a time of assassinations and unrest, it asked a chilling question. What happens when the scariest stories are true? Forgotten for years, Targets is now seen as one of the boldest and most unsettling films of its time, a farewell to fantasy, and a warning we still haven't fully heard. 7 Seconds, 1966. What if you could be someone else? Arthur Hamilton had everything. A job, a house, a wife, and a soul-deep emptiness he couldn't explain. Until one day, a stranger whispered an impossible offer. We can give you a new life, a new face, a second chance. He took it. Through surgery, lies, and death certificates, Arthur became Tony Wilson, a younger, stronger, freer man, an artist, a bachelor, a new beginning under the California sun. But freedom has shadows, and reinvention has a price. As Tony tried to live his new life, the cracks began to show. Nothing felt real. The community around him smiled too perfectly. And worst of all, the guilt of his old self refused to die. What began as escape soon unraveled into a waking nightmare. One that ends not in rebirth, but in a chilling revelation. Directed by John Frankenheimer, the Manchurian Candidate, and starring Rock Hudson in a shockingly dark role, Seconds is a psychological sci-fi thriller that was too bold for its time. Audiences didn't understand it. Critics dismissed it. It vanished like the identities it portrayed. But over the years, it has been rediscovered and celebrated as a paranoid masterpiece, a Kafkaesque vision of identity, regret, and the terrifying question, what if your second chance is worse than your first? Because in the end, there are no second chances, only seconds. 8. A Matter of Life and Death, 1946. The Stairway Between. Peter March was a pilot falling through time. His bomber had caught fire during a night raid, his crew gone, his parachute destroyed. As the ocean rushed up to greet him, he whispered into his radio, not a mayday, but a message of love. June, if you're there, I'm not afraid. And then nothing. No crash. No pain. Instead, Peter awoke on a beach, the sky blushing with sunrise, waves licking his boots. Nearby stood a woman, her, June, an American radio operator. Alive, real. They met, they laughed, they fell in love. But heaven had made a mistake. Up in the celestial courts, a French conductor turned angel named Conductor 71 realized he had missed his cue. Peter was supposed to die. His survival was a clerical error. Yet in those stolen hours, Peter had found something even heaven couldn't account for. Love. Now summoned to the afterlife, Peter refused. You were late, he argued, and I have something worth living for now. The heavens agreed to a trial. With time frozen on earth, Peter's soul stood trial in a courtroom not of laws, but of eternity. Arguing his case were advocates from every corner of history. Love poems and war crimes cited alike. June, heartbroken and alone in the still world, waited below, her tears falling in suspended motion. Peter's final defense was simple. He had not asked to survive, but now that he had, his heart beat only for her. In the end, even the stars bowed to love. The great stairway descended from the sky, not to claim Peter, but to let him stay. 9. The Friends of Eddie Coyle, 1973. One last favor. Eddie Coyle had done time. He'd done favors. He'd stayed quiet when the cold metal bars closed, and all he ever got in return was the sound of the door locking behind him. Now he was older. His hands ached in the cold, and his breath fogged up the windshield of his rusted-out Chevy as he sat in a lot outside a diner in South Boston. He wasn't asking for much, just no more jail, just to grow old quietly with a drink in hand, and no cops or cons breathing down his neck. But life wasn't built like that in Eddie's world. He still had connections. A crew of young guys knocking off banks liked him for the guns he could quietly deliver. The feds liked him even more for the names he could give. Everybody wanted something. Nobody gave anything. His latest job was simple. Supply weapons for another job. But word was the feds were circling. And that's when Dave Foley came knocking. A Fed with a cold smile and promises thin as ice. Give me a name, Dave said, and I'll make sure the judge never hears yours. Eddie had done time for his so-called friends before, but now his future was just a long shadow on a short wall. He made a choice, gave a name, one last favor. The job went off. The crew got caught. Dave shook Eddie's hand, like it meant something. And then quiet. Eddie showed up to the hockey game alone. The seats were cold, the beer flat, the crowd distant. He never saw the man who slid into the seat behind him, never saw the gun, never felt the cold steel against his neck. Just one sharp moment, and then nothing. Later that night, the body of a quiet old man was found in a parked car outside the arena. No witnesses, no fanfare, just Eddie Coyle, friend and nobody in the end. 10. Time After Time, 1979. Clockwork and Shadows. It began with a machine. Brass gears, polished wood, humming wires. A dream built in Victorian London by none other than H.G. Wells himself. He called it a time machine, though no one took it seriously. No one except John. John Leslie Stevenson was a friend, a physician, and secretly Jack the Ripper. When the police came knocking, John disappeared into the future. Wells followed. The machine hurled him forward, past the smog, past the gaslights and horse-drawn carriages, into San Francisco, 1979. It was loud, blinding, alive, and terrifying. A world of television, cars, endless choices, and a city that never looked over its shoulder. Perfect for a killer. Wells wasn't a hero. He was a man of ideas, of books and philosophy. But this time, theory wasn't enough. He had to stop John. Because here, in this careless century, murder could vanish into the noise. Then he met Amy, a bank clerk with sharp eyes and a disarming smile. She thought he was insane at first. Who wouldn't? But something in his voice, in the way he looked at the world like it was new and fragile, made her believe. Together, they chased shadows through neon streets. John was always a step ahead, slipping through crowds, leaving blood and terror behind him. And every time they got close, Amy saw something change in Wells, a rage beneath the reason, a fury that burned not for revenge, but for humanity. In the final confrontation, in the depths of a museum echoing with timepieces, Wells faced a man who had betrayed him in history, not with fists, but with will. He made a choice. He would go back, destroy the machine, bury the future so monsters like John could never escape justice again. But Amy stopped him. She held his hand, trembling, and whispered, "Stay. We can build a better world here, together." And for the first time in all his theorizing, Wells chose the unknown not of time, but of love. And that wraps up our journey through 10 incredible films that were just too good to stay forgotten. From time-traveling dreamers to underworld antiheroes, these hidden gems prove that great cinema never truly fades. It just waits to be rediscovered. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments which forgotten masterpiece spoke to you the most, or if we miss a film that deserves the spotlight. If you enjoyed this trip through cinematic history, give us a like. And don't forget to subscribe to Globewise Entertainment for more deep dives into the films time tried to forget, but we never will. Until next time, keep watching, keep wondering, and keep cinema alive.